Hello, media listeners. In this video today, I will be analyzing the situation about possibility of United States annexing economical annexion of Canada. Okay, so there is a bombshell. I will compare the different opinions, and then I'm gonna give what I think about that after living over 30 years here in Canada. Okay, but first let's see what's the argument that Donald Trump is making, because it's becoming quite seriously in a recent press conference.
First state of the United States, the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada said, under no circumstances will ever be the 51st state.
Maybe he won't win, but maybe he will.
You would suggest.
Listen, I don't care what he says.
Sir, you're considering military force to acquire Panama and Greenland. Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire?
No, economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. But here's the problem with Canada. So many friends up there. I love the Canadian people. They're great. But we're spending hundreds of billions a year to protect it. We're spending hundreds of billions a year to take care of Canada. We lose in trade deficits. We're losing massive. We don't need their cars. You know, they make 20% of our cars. We don't need that. I'd rather make them in Detroit. We don't need the cars. We don't need their lumber. We have massive fields of lumber. We don't need their lumber. We have to unrestrict them because stupid people put, restrictions on, but I can do that with an executive order. We don't need anything they have. We don't need their dairy products. We have more than they have. We don't need anything. So why are we losing $200 billion a year and more to protect Canada? And I said that to, as I called him, Governor Trudeau. I said, listen, what would happen if we didn't subsidize you, if we didn't, because we give them a lot of money. We help them. As an example, we're buying icebreakers, and Canada wants to join us in the buying of icebreakers. I said, we don't really want to have a partner in the buying of icebreakers. We don't need a partner. But no right. Nope. No right. Here's what we have. We have a right not to help them with their financial difficulties because we owe $36 trillion too. We're going to start knocking it out pretty fast, but we're going to be able to do it because of energy and other things. But no right. No right. But why are we supporting a country, $200 billion plus a year? Our military is at their disposal. All of these other things, they should be a state. That's why I told Trudeau when he came down. I said, what would happen if we didn't do it? He said Canada would dissolve. Canada wouldn't be able to function if we didn't take their 20% of our car market. They send us hundreds of thousands of cars. They make a lot of money with that. They send us a lot of other things that we don't need. We don't need their cars, and we don't need the other products. We don't need their milk. We get a lot of milk. We get a lot of everything, and we don't need any of it. So I said to him, well, why are we doing it? He said, I don't really know. He was unable to answer the question, but I can answer it. We're doing it because of habit, and we're doing it because we like our neighbors, and we've been good neighbors. But we can't do it forever, and it's a tremendous amount of money. And why should we have a $200 billion deficit and add on to that many, many other things that we give them in terms of subsidy? And I said, that's okay to have if you're a state. But if you're another country, we don't want to have it. We're not going to have it with European.
First, America doesn't need Canada produce cars, doesn't need Canada produce lumber, and Canada produce dairy products. Which is, I think, I'm not being an expert, but I agree that probably America has plenty of those, and they can supply themselves. But how about the oil from Alberta? How about the electricity from Ontario and Quebec? And there is probably, I'm not that expert in everything, but there is probably, it's not like a one-sided question. That I'm certainly that Canada produce quite a bit of things that American are benefiting from buying at a good price. But I agree here with the argument, if Canada loses these markets on the short term, it's going to be devastating. And on the longer term, it's going to take years before actually Canada will be able to replace those markets and find new partnerships. Those enterprises could be bankrupt. So it's a serious threat. If we have to take it seriously, regardless of what is going to come out of it. But now let's listen. What's the response? Like what the response we have from the Canadians' side?
The massive trade deficits and subsidies that Canada needs to stay afloat. Justin Trudeau knew this and resigned. If Canada merged with the U.S., there would be no tariffs, taxes would go way down, and they would be totally secure from the threat of the Russian and Chinese ships that are constantly surrounding them. Together, what a great nation it would be. Okay, Premier Wynne, weigh in first. When you first heard and saw, because this isn't the first one, he's done this before. When you first saw and heard about all this, what went through your head?
Well, that people keep saying he's not a serious person, but we have to take him seriously, and I think that's where we are. We have to. I hear this as a threat that is pushing us to negotiate on something else. That's what I.
On that, and you have to bring the crisis beyond imagination to make this even consideration possible. Okay, which is could happen. We could have a crisis where the condition become unbearable, where there will be a larger support from joining the United States, maybe from certain provinces. Otherwise, as we stand in 8 January of 2025, I think it's a more of just a pressure to get something else from Canada, but it's not serious. We don't have it serious. But let's look for how it can be perceived from the Canadian side.
United States, infant mortality per 1,000 live births. Canada is 4 and they're 5, so we're healthier in that regard. Our life expectancy, 82 years, there's only 79. COVID deaths per 100,000, 135 in Canada, 341 in the United States. We seem to have made it through COVID much better than they did. How about, let's check some other metrics here. In terms of racial equality, Canada is 62nd in the world out of 150 countries surveyed. The United States is 138th when it comes to racial equality. How about gender equality? We're 51st, they're 109th. What does the OECD and the European Union say about child poverty? Canada's got 17% child poverty, the United States 26% child poverty. And how about one of these nice amorphous terms, happiness? On the happiness index, we're considered the 15th happiest country in the world, the US only 23rd. So, okay, Laura, given those numbers, should we be inquiring about making them the 11th province of Canada?
Well, I think the same dynamics apply in that, do we want a significant rightward shift for Canada? Do we want to go from a society with a strong social safety net where everyone matters to a, good luck, it's great for entrepreneurs, but if you're on the lower end of the spectrum, you don't have the kind of health and social protections that you need and that you would
represent the difference. What's the core of the discussion should be, because we have to make Canada a little bit much more better for entrepreneurs, and then this could go away. That situation, and it will be become more obvious in the next. We could keep some of the safety nets at a certain extent. I think maybe not at the extent we have right now, but in my opinion, we could keep them for what we have, but it needs substantial reform, especially the free health system that we have in Canada. But this is a fundamental difference. So if you are a business and you want to make money, the United States model is definitely for you. But it's not kind of majority of the people. Unfortunately, they are not entrepreneurs. So for the majority of the people, the trade-off here is not beneficial. Okay, but you cannot have prosperity and social net, because the entrepreneurs end up to eventually create all of this. So you have to be wise and fair for you entrepreneurs, and you have to cultivate them before you can have some social safety nets. And then also let's listen the other side of the argument. Listen this economical argument.
I've been tracking economic statistics in relationship to Canada and sort of left me open-mouthed in amazement at our dismal condition. So from what I've been able to understand, the richest people per capita in terms of GDP per person, gross domestic product per person, so that's total productivity, is Ontario. And Ontario inhabitants are now poorer per capita than inhabitants of Mississippi, and that's the poorest American state. So the inhabitants of Canada's richest province are poorer than the inhabitants of the United States' poorest state, and that's actually occurred primarily in the last 10 years.
Yes.
And because we were basically at parity before that.
Yes.
And had historically been not quite as rich as the Americans, with some, blips above them, but pretty much tracking them one to one.
Yeah.
And now it's 60%, something like that. And that's not all the bad news, because it's 60% in terms of absolute wealth, and a real estate market that's twice as expensive approximately on average.
Yeah.
Right. So now
it's really bad. It's really incredible. 10 years ago, the New York Times wrote an article, Welcome to Canada, home of the world's most affluent middle class. And in that article, the Times had calculated that median American and Canadian incomes were tied, and that Canadians were slightly better off. Now, part of that was because the 08-09 financial crisis hit them harder than it hit us, but still. Now, per capita GDP in the States is $22,000 higher than in Canada, measured in USD. So that's about almost 30,000 measured in.
Right, so that's a whole other income, essentially.
Yes.
That's a whole other part-time income.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, as you correctly point out, their real estate is significantly cheaper than ours. So their dollars go a lot further, even when you match up the exchange rates. And what's worse than that is that the leading indicators are even more horrific. And leading indicators, for example, are investment dollars, because your wealth tomorrow is determined by your investment today. So if your employer, for example, is buying lots of new tools and technology, you're going to be able to crank out more widgets. So you crank out those widgets, then you can ultimately make more income down the road. If you take business investment and divide it by the number of workers, the American worker gets $28,000 of investment measured in US dollars.
Is it per capita?
Per
Or
worker,
per year?
per worker, per member of the labor force.
Okay.
So you take the total business investment of the United States divided by the total number of workers in America, it's 28 grand. In Canada, it's 15 grand. So the Canadian worker gets about 55 cents for every dollar of his American, and they're both measured in USD. So how is the Canadian
That's
worker?
investment in future productivity?
That's investment in machines and technology, warehouses, factories,
I see.
any capital investment that businesses make divided by the number of workers. That's the measurement. So now that means they're getting better technology, better new machines, better tools than our workers, and they will be able to crank out even greater wages for their people than we will, unless we catch up with that. Our productivity is another major problem. Like right now, and that productivity sounds complicated. It's actually extremely simple. You just take the GDP and you divide it by the hours worked in the country. So American GDP is $80. So for every hour an American worker works, on average, he or she produces $80 of GDP. In Canada, it's 50. So that's every hour. So that means we have to work 60% more just to make the same amount and have the same level of income to buy food and housing. So now that sounds like a bunch of wonk speak that might seem like it only matters to someone staring at a spreadsheet or a graph or a chart. But in fact, that's reflected in the fact that our 2 million people are lined up at food banks because they can't afford food, and 80% of youth can't afford homes, and our quality of life and the things we can afford to provide our kids have fallen back so much.
Well,
There's
that's a pretty
life.
stark and easily comprehensible statistic.
Yeah.
And if you work and you produce $80 worth of goods and services in an hour compared to working and producing 50, obviously that's a substantial shortfall.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a very good point in the terms of that American economic model in some ways is superior, and especially, well, it became superior in the past 10 years, but it wasn't always the same. And it is a good point if you listen from this discussion what we can take, that 10 years ago, despite of the safety nets that were the same pretty much in Canada 10 years ago, the income was the same. So you could have both. You could have great praise for entrepreneurs and investors, and we have to think about the investors. Like, who thinks about those fat cats, or but without them, really, there's nothing happens. Okay, there's nothing happens. You need to attract capital. The capital needs to be left, not to be extracted from the productive economy and wasted by government. It should be left in the hands of the entrepreneurs, so they create more jobs, they create more productive capacities in terms of capital investment. And that's just the economic laws. But we can have both. We can have kind of good health system and we can have more safety nets. I'm a little bit afraid, like more socialism, assuming that the investors and entrepreneurs are taking care. So that's what I'm taking, and for sure there is no support. I'm not in the support of the annexion of the Canada by the United States. I don't think of course there's some people there's some people like United States, and but this is a minority. The majority of the Canadians, they want to keep their sovereignty, and I don't think for the Americans it's going to be beneficial in any way, especially for the Republicans. They even openly talking about that if they bring those 9 new Canadian states that will be more socially orientated, they will be in opposition of the current Republicans. So they have no interest in of really doing so. So I wouldn't be afraid of real I don't think it's a real threat unless we fall into some kind of crisis, which is we were going to fall into some kind of crisis, but it's going to be like a condition, a bad condition beyond imaginations. I think the condition is going to be bad, in my opinion, but not that bad. So the Canada will be seriously annexed. This will become serious discussion in the future. I hope we will have enough resources internally to manage our problems and turn this around. Okay, thanks for watching, and please like and comment to support the video.